Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be talking about 7 fragrances that are relatively recent and that I haven't talked about. This isn't a ranked list, I'm just going to be reviewing these and telling you all about what they smell like, how they perform, and what they are. So first up we have from the House of Mancera, Windwood. Windwood was released in 2014 and it's available in a 60 milliliter or the bigger 120 milliliter bottle. The opening of Windwood, it will instantly remind you of a designer fragrance, but I don't mean that in a bad way. It's fresh, it's a little bit salty, it maybe has some pepper. It almost reminds me of cucumbers in a way. It has this very designer feel. It smells classic, it smells refined. It's a little bit generic, but that's not a bad thing in this case. I haven't personally smelled anything extremely similar to this, so it's hard to pinpoint why this smells so designery. Maybe it's, an ambroxan note, or just because it's so fresh and easy to wear. But this does smell a lot more interesting than, your average Bleu de Chanel or Dior Sauvage. For people who want to explore into the niche category, but don't want to smell like Zoologist T-Rex or anything like that, this is a really good starting point. I think this is very mass appealing. It's rated well by everyone that's smelled it. And of course, being a Mancera is a very above average performance, so I get about 12 hours on my skin with moderate to strong projection. I'll put the notes on the screen for all of these fragrances, but I will tell you, without looking at the notes, exactly what I smell. So in Windwood, I get a very strong, masculine, almost briny type of saltiness. A lot of people make fun of Nautica Voyage because they say it smells like salty cucumbers. Mancera's Windwood is actually a better embodiment of that description. It's salty, it's fresh, it's clean, it's strong, it's mass appealing, it's versatile, and it's definitely a masculine fragrance. Some people will form a dislike to Mancera's Windwood just because this is a niche house. It does retail for $200, but you can get it for a lot cheaper on the gray market. A lot of times when people are paying niche prices or just exploring niche houses, they don't want to smell like designer fragrances. So although this doesn't smell, too similar to anything that's very popular out there, it is still a very designer smell. This is one of the few times I would say that if you're into these masculine, clean, fresh, and strong fragrances, this may be a blind buy safe fragrance. So Mancera Windwood, it's not anything that is going to blow you away if you're really looking for a niche fragrance or something with a lot more depth, but I think it's very well blended, it's incredible, it performs well, you can get it at a good price, and for what it's trying to do, it perfects it. If you've heard people say that Mancera is designer in a niche bottle done to perfection, I'd say, with some fragrances that's true, like this, but then obviously, they have a lot more fragrances, which you'll see coming up in the same video. But in this case, this is a designer in a niche bottle done to perfection. If that sounds good to you, check out Mancera's Windwood. Next up comes from the House of Demeter, and it's Pumpkin Spice Latte. So before I get into this fragrance, Demeter is a fragrance house, a niche fragrance house that has hundreds and hundreds of perfumes, and they specialize in typically one note or a few note fragrances, and they try to replicate scents extremely accurately. So for example, they have a fragrance called Dirt and one called Rain or Petrichor and stuff like that. And this one is Pumpkin Spice Latte, and of course it smells like a pumpkin spice latte. I'm sure all the people that love the fall season are definitely going to want to buy this, but let me just explain some reasons why you might want to hold off. When you think of the fall time, pumpkin spice lattes are, one of the first things that will come up. Lots and lots of people like it, so I know there have been some attempts at making it into a fragrance, but I haven't heard so many good things. So a couple months ago, I got this by Demeter, Pumpkin Spice Latte. I saw decent reviews and I picked it up and I wanted to check it out for myself. The main question is, does it smell like a pumpkin spice latte? And the answer is kind of. First of all, with this fragrance house, Demeter, they're not trying to make sense to last 20 hours or anything like that, but this thing genuinely lasts 3 hours and then disappears on your skin, and it has very soft projection. So that's not really a big issue. I mean, I feel like this is kind of more of a comfort scent or just something that people want to have in their collection for fun. But that definitely is something to look out for if you're trying to buy this. My best way to describe this scent, instead of a pumpkin spice latte, straight from Starbucks or from one of those cafes, it smells like pumpkin spice latte flavored items. The first thing that came to mind when I smelled this was pumpkin spice latte Cheerios. I don't know if you've had that. They smell like pumpkin spice latte a little bit, but there's this weird kind of wheat. If you can imagine the smell of a Cheerio and then mixed with this synthetic pumpkin spice latte scent, that's exactly what this smells like. I don't think it's a bad thing, but if you're looking for a photorealistic pumpkin spice latte fragrance, this isn't it, because this really does smell like pumpkin spice Cheerios. Not everyone is going to appreciate that. I don't really care though. This is fun to have in my collection. It's fun to spray around. And something with bad performing fragrances that people don't talk about is sometimes you don't want to have a scent that lasts for 20 hours. You know, it's fun to spray something and then 2 hours later you can spray something else on a clean slate. So if this sounds interesting to you, then check out Demeter's Pumpkin Spice Latte. Next up is also by the House of Mancera, and this is Roses Greedy. This was an appropriately named fragrance because the first thing that hits your nose is a very nice light floral rose. I don't mean light as in the scent isn't strong. The scent is actually very strong. I just mean that it's not a jammy rose, it's more of an airy rose. The rose is paired with a very nice musk note and some other florals that aren't too pronounced but balance the scent together. This is definitely one of the more feminine leaning scents in my collection. So for the women out there that love roses, definitely check this one out. It's pretty inexpensive on the gray market. It's a great performer, 12 to 15 hours on skin with pretty large projection. Roses Greedy isn't trying to be anything different. It's not trying to be super unique. So for what it is, it's very well done. The only issue with this fragrance is sometimes in the opening, there's a little bit of a sharp astringency. Not like a Montale or Mancera Oud. It's not one of those. But I think maybe the molecule they use for the musk is a little bit sharp, but after 5 to 10 minutes that disappears, so it's nothing to really worry about. But Roses Greedy, it's done very well. If you don't like roses, obviously stay away from this, but Roses Greedy, this sounds good to you, or if you would want to smell this on someone, check this out. Next up, from the House of Creed, my first Creed fragrance, and I got this in a trade because these things are extremely expensive. This is Creed Aventus Cologne. Unfortunately, there's only about 20 milliliters of this 50 milliliter bottle left. But I can't even complain. I've been wanting this for a while. It's one of my favorite scent profiles, and I'm very happy about it. The question I'm sure a lot of you are asking is this an unnecessary Creed Aventus flanker? And my short answer is no. Creed Aventus Cologne, which I believe is an eau de parfum concentration, although correct me if I'm wrong because I'm not positive, shares a very similar DNA to the original, but there are some major differences that are worth noting. The opening of Creed Aventus Cologne is fresher than the original, so they take away that masculine pepper, those woods, and there's no smokiness coming from Aventus Cologne. Instead, what you get is that same gorgeously masculine Creed Aventus DNA with some very gorgeous citrus in the opening. I don't know if there's pineapple listed in this, but the main things I'm getting is, imagine your original Creed Aventus. I'm sure a lot of you have smelled it. If not, the best way I can describe it is the masculine touch of smoky pepper with pineapple, and Aventus Cologne takes away that smoke, takes away the pepper, and utilizes this very bright and sweet orange and pineapple note. At least that's what I get to my nose. I'm not sure if that's listed in there. This is one of the best blends I have in my entire collection. Of course, being a Creed fragrance, it's very well rounded, very, very well blended. However, the longevity and projection is one thing that people worry about when it comes to Creed fragrances. So Creed Aventus Cologne, I'm not exactly sure how much it is. I believe the 50 ml retail goes for around $350, right? Typically on the gray market, even for a 50 ml, you're going to be paying closer to $200, maybe a little less, but around that range, which is very, very pricey. And when people are paying $200 for a fragrance, especially when it comes in a 50 milliliter bottle, they're expecting some very good performance so that they don't have to buy another bottle in 2 months or whatever. Now, I don't think this is a bad performing fragrance, but it's just a very slightly above average performer in my opinion. Longevity is around 6 hours, which is not bad for a freshie. Projection is moderate, sometimes intimate, kind of depending on how much you spray. And just knowing that each one of these sprays is like 80 cents, it's hard to spray this 15 times every time you go out. However, if you want people to smell you, that's what you're gonna have to do with Creed Aventus Cologne. So if that's a deal breaker, that's totally understandable. In terms of scent, this might be one of the greatest fragrances I've ever smelled. But because of the performance and the price, it's hard to justify buying a whole bottle of this. So I'm very lucky that I got a little bit in a trade. When I run out of this, it's going to be difficult to justify a full bottle, but it's so good that I think this is one that's worth getting. If you don't like that super peppery masculine part of Creed Aventus, check out its little brother, Creed Aventus Cologne. The next three all come from the House of Mancera. If you can't tell, I love the house. I think they offer incredible quality for price. So let's talk about Mancera's Precious Oud. If you see Mancera and you see Oud and you're one of those people that are a little bit nervous about the astringency of it, don't worry because this is not one of those. If you don't know, Pierre Montale is supposedly the perfumer of all of Montale and all of Mancera fragrances. And he specializes in Oud and rose fragrances, and specifically Oud fragrances. One thing people don't like about either of the brands is that sometimes the oud oil that Pierre Montale uses is very sharp. A good example is in Mancera's Black Intensive Oud. I think this released the year that the brand launched, Mancera, which was in 2008. I'm not 100% sure if that's true. There's definitely a noticeable sharp oud note in this, which not everyone likes. However, Mancera's Precious Oud has none of that. People that hate on Mancera clearly haven't smelled many of their fragrances other than their 4 or 5 very popular ones. Because I see a lot of people say that Manceras are poor quality, uninspiring, boring, and very designer. And I would say that not one of those is true. Now, that doesn't mean they have some designer smells like Wynwood, and that doesn't mean that some are a little bit poorer quality like Black Intensive Oud, but as a whole, Mancera is one of the best inexpensive niche houses you can get your nose on. Especially in the last 6 years, Mancera has really stepped up as a brand and really has made their fragrances higher quality and less astringent to the nose. And a great example is in Mancera's Precious Oud, which I believe came out in 2019. Precious Oud opens up with a very similar oud oil to some of the oud oils used in Amouage's. Amouage's King Blue and Amouage's Silver Oud both open up with a very animalistic, slightly barnyardy oud, and I think Mancera's Precious Oud opens up with a similar funky oud. However, it's a lot more tolerable in this, and it's blended extremely well. The fragrance is very round, and all the notes in this balance each other out. So the main thing I'm getting on the opening is almost a rotting fruit note, but I mean that in the best way possible. There's a really deep and slightly sweet chocolatiness coming from the back as well. The funkiness from the oud is a lot more prominent on skin. The first time I smelled this, I tested it on paper and I thought that there was some fruit in it. I looked at the notes, there wasn't any fruit. I sprayed it on skin and I got a little bit of that like funky fruit, almost. I've never smelled durian, but that seems like it could be something that this reminds me of. When I say rotting fruit, I don't necessarily mean that. It doesn't smell rotting, but it smells a little bit off. 20 minutes later though, this gorgeous tiramisu note comes out. It's chocolatey, it's airy, it's a little bit creamy, and it balances that slightly funky oud. And it is such a great balance. This smells extremely niche. It's very high quality, very rounded, very well blended, and a very great price on the gray market. So definitely check out Mancera's Precious Oud. This is one that, although it has that little bit of a funky oud note, I loved it from the second I smelled it, and I think this will grow on me the more I wear it. Next up, also from the house of Mancera, is Amber Fever. It's not very ambery as the name would suggest. There is obviously some amber in the dry down, but this is more of a Baccarat Rouge inspired fragrance. I get that Baccarat Rouge is a little bit of an overused DNA. It's one of the most duped DNAs. It's extremely popular, but this has enough of a twist to make it worth getting. You can imagine the Baccarat Rouge DNA, keep that in your head, and I'm gonna build off of that. For those who haven't smelled Baccarat Rouge, it's this synthetic cotton candy type smell. It's universally loved and hated at the same time. It's very infamous, that's what I'll say, but it's extremely popular with Mancera's Amber Fever. Tone back the syntheticness and add a lot of booze in here. Whiskey, rum, I'm not sure what it is, but something is in here that's making it very boozy and a lot darker than the original Baccarat. There's also a hint of nuttiness coming from maybe hazelnut, some other nut, I'm not sure, maybe pistachio. And then of course, deeper into the dry down, this extremely smooth amber that is sweet, but not overbearingly sweet, and it just balances everything out perfectly. So imagine a boozier, less synthetic, a little bit nuttier, better blended Baccarat Rouge, and that is what Mancera's Amber Fever is. If that sounds good to you, definitely check it out. If you're a Baccarat Rouge fan, if you want to explore similar scents to that go different ways, then this is definitely one for you, Mancera's Amber Fever. And last, but definitely not least, phenomenal fragrance in my opinion, Mancera's Intense Red Tobacco. If you're someone who hears red tobacco and instantly gets scared, don't worry, because I promise this is a much better blend. First thing to get out of the way, this is the intense flanker, but it is not a more intense version of red tobacco. It's smoother, it's rounder, it's much better quality, and it's this DNA perfected. I'll start off by describing the original red tobacco, which is this very, very pungent tobacco and overload of sweet spices that just hit your nose. The original one lasted about 24 hours on skin, weeks on clothes, and projected more than you could even imagine. You could fill up a museum with red tobacco, I'm not even joking. Red tobacco was the first of its kind. It was extremely inspiring, inspired fragrances like Parfums de Marly Carlisle and Argos's Triumph of Bacchus, which are both very highly regarded scents. So if you haven't smelled the original red tobacco and you like those, that's what inspired it. 2021, Mancera came out with the intense flanker of red tobacco, and people were a little bit surprised because who would want a more intense version of one of the strongest fragrances ever created? Luckily, that's not the case. However, this is perfected. The Intense Flanker, which is what I have right here, is so much more smoothed out from opening to dry down. The original tobacco and spices were very sharp and just attack your noses until about 8 hours into the fragrance, where it dried down to a much more wearable and smooth scent. Red Tobacco Intense opens very much like 8 hours after the opening of the original Red Tobacco, where that has smoothed out. So this is smooth all the way through. This gets rid of some of that fruitiness, adds in some darker elements, which I'm not sure if we needed, but I think it works very well. To someone who's never smelled Red Tobacco, Carlisle, Triumph of Bacchus, Intense Red Tobacco, or any of those fragrances, I will try to explain this in a very simple way. It smells almost fruit punchy in a way. There are lots of spices, there's saffron, there's cinnamon, all of these things are working together, and this is one of the most interesting and niche smelling fragrances that's been created in the last decade. As this fragrance dries down, there's some oud, there's vanilla, there's some smokiness, there's a leather. All of these fragrance notes are coming together to create some of the best sillage imaginable. Although this is less intense, it is not weak by any means. This lasts 16 to 19 hours on skin. Again, days, weeks on clothes, maybe even longer. And this will also fill a room, but not a museum. You know what? I take that back. This will fill a museum, but not in the way that the original does. The original would punch your nose, so everyone around you would obviously smell it, but it would be like an attack. This is so much more smoothed out that even though people can smell you within like a 60-foot radius, 100-foot radius, when people get their nose on this in the air, it's very smooth and it's very well blended. If you're scarred from the original Red Tobacco DNA, I can't blame you, but I think that this is definitely worth checking out. One of my favorite fragrances in my entire collection, one of the best performers in my entire collection, one of the nicest bottles in my entire collection, and although this retails at $220, you can get it for closer to $70 or $80 on the gray market, which is an incredible price for a fragrance like this. Especially now that winter is arriving, I think Intense Red Tobacco is one of the best fragrances for the winter time, and I would recommend it any day of the week. One last thing I want to touch on with Mancera's Red Tobacco is, with the original Red Tobacco, I would say 3 sprays is genuinely more than you need because it projects so much and it lasts so long and it just kind of assaults everyone's nose. With the Intense version, some of you might think I'm crazy, but I think you could go 7 sprays. But for me, for example, I spray a lot, like a lot. Typically I go 10 to 14 sprays with whatever I'm doing. You know, if it's something extremely strong like Koyam, I won't go more than 3 or 4. But for Intense Red Tobacco, even though it's super strong, because it's so well blended and so rounded out, I will go typically 7 sprays, and I think that is the perfect balance between having everyone around you smell you, but it won't assault their noses at the same time. Thanks for watching. I'll definitely be making some more videos in the future. I took a little bit of a break because of school and everything, but hopefully I can post more often. So thank you for watching, thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you next time.